Hello, welcome to CIO Leadership Live Australia. I'm Kathy O'Sullivan, Editorial Director in ANZ for Foundry. On today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Geoff Quattromani, who is Head of Technology at Johnson & Johnson MedTech ANZ. Hi, Geoff. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
Good morning, Kathy. Thanks for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity.
Awesome. Great to chat to you again. So firstly, can you give us a bit of a potted history of your career to date and how you got your start in IT?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I'll be honest, in terms of how I got my start in IT, it must have been from, I guess, not growing up very well off. The reality is that our first computer in the household from memory was a 386 DOS-based computer. And if you wanted that thing to run better over time, or you wanted to play a different program or whatever it was, we didn't necessarily have the money to buy a new computer every time. So I learned how to upgrade computers, how to rebuild them, how to pull them apart and install new features into them. And probably that curiosity of having needs, of wanting to do more with the technology, but not having the finances to always do it, meant that you learnt how to make it happen. And as a result, you start fixing the neighbor's computer when something goes wrong, or the relatives. And that just was the starting point, that once you get through school, I had this question of, well, what am I going to do now? I wasn't a very bright student. I mean, if you tested me on my maths or science, I may struggle. But coming out of school, I actually ended up being employed by the schools. I ended up working for the Catholic Education Office as a sort of a bit of a fix-it kid, running around repairing all the bananas that get stuck in the back of computers. Back then, the mice had little balls that used to get ripped out all the time, and fixing that as well. But I didn't go straight into university. I had a very different approach after school. So yeah, working for the education system was amazing. I was put through a traineeship there, which I really enjoyed. And then I moved into a more consultant role with a different company, where every day was different, going to people's homes or going into different corporate environments, working on servers or working on just installing Wi-Fi systems. And then I moved into manufacturing. And wow, that was a totally different shift again, because the manufacturing industry is quite dynamic, and their needs are very different as well. But I managed their corporate network and was able to facilitate system upgrades and managing everything there. And then for the last 15 years, I've been in healthcare. So I started with Synthes, which was an orthopedics company, and then they were acquired by Johnson & Johnson, where I am now. And I've been over 10 years with Johnson & Johnson now.
Wow, that's quite the start and quite the career path that you've carved out there. So you're now at Johnson & Johnson. You've been there for a number of years, as you've said. Can you tell us a bit more about Johnson & Johnson MedTech ANZ and what you and the team look after there?
Yeah, look, I'm a little bit lucky when I say that I work for Johnson & Johnson, because it's a company that helps people. We're not too worried about from a product perspective. When you have conversations in the street, are you afraid to say who you work for? This company helps my mum, your neighbor, people all over the world. So from a company perspective, I'm very fortunate. But my role as head of technology for Australia and New Zealand, I report into our regional or Asia Pacific CIO. On the ground in Australia, we have a pretty small but extremely intelligent team, and we all have offshore teams that sort of support each other as well. So, but locally on the ground, this small team that we have, we're really managing the needs of the local business, and that's providing end-to-end project delivery of different solutions that we have. We're currently going through a major CRM change at the moment as well, a really large, I guess, digital marketing implementation, and a few other things. But yeah, compared to the amount of work that we're doing, we don't have a lot of bodies behind it. So I'm very lucky that we have a really capable team with that.
So you've touched on some of the work that you and the team are doing there at the moment. So can you tell us, how is that digitalization journey tracking, and what have been some of the things you and the team have achieved in the last few years?
Yeah, so I mean, Johnson & Johnson as a company has changed a lot, quite a bit as well. So what used to be a company of 3 different businesses, largely what people knew of the consumer brands of Band-Aid and so on, that's no longer part of Johnson & Johnson. But I sit with what's now called MedTech. But prior to that, it was called medical devices. So when we were told we're going through this rebrand from medical devices to MedTech, I thought, We can't just do that from a branding perspective. You can't just change the label on the door and say you're now a tech company. You really need to act like a tech company. And that meant a lot of change inside the business. So this digitalization journey that I guess we've been on has been a number of years in the making, but I'll say the first thing that changed was our digital presence. Our online presence with our customers has changed significantly. The way that we can engage with them through web, through digital marketing, even virtual and mixed reality settings that we've been putting in place as well. That entire customer experience has changed dramatically over the last number of years because, unfortunately, you can only have so many physical interactions, but when you bring digital into the mix, that's really lifted up that capability. But to do that, we also had to focus on our people. Lifting that digital literacy in the business has been such an important goal of ours in terms of how do we make sure people know about AI? How do we make sure people know how to use the tools that we're providing to them? Or if we're taking a digital direction, are they digitally capable as well? And, globally, we had what they call a global learning day last year, where everyone was told to take the day off effectively and only focus on learn something. And the number one course that came up for most employees was AI. So it was remarkable to see that when given the opportunity, the organization being now more digitally minded also took that chance to actually take that course and spend their time that day doing that. So we're very lucky in that sense. But then the other piece I'd probably say from a digital perspective that we're focusing on, probably like most companies, is your data and your analytics. How do we get more out of the information that we have so that we can ultimately serve our patients better, but also drive the direction of the business in the way that it needs to go? Because I think if you ask some people in the past, they may have said that some decisions were made on gut feeling, what felt right at the time or what people were telling them. But when you start looking at that data and it starts to reveal, facts and truth, you've got to stand by that. And that was one big thing. And look, lastly, as we talk about, in terms of things that we've achieved or things that we're tracking on, I think the last thing that everyone is probably focused on at the moment would be cost savings and efficiency. How do you not only get more from the tools and resources that you have, but how do you drive down costs to serve your business better at the moment? Because in these times, I think every company is probably noticing that it feels a little bit different and people can always do a little bit of savings along the way.
Yeah, certainly. It is definitely something a lot of CIOs are focusing on the moment is on the cost. So are there any other kind of challenges, that you've encountered over the last few years and how did you overcome them?
Look, I would say thinking about every company that I have been with, the one thing that you'll probably hear from anybody would be resourcing. How do I get more people? How do I have more time? How do I get more money in my budgets? That's always going to be a challenge. And I think for us, how we sort of tackle challenges like that is prioritization. And we are ruthless in the way that we prioritize because we think about the patient first, the patient that's on the table, and what's going to impact them versus what's going to impact me. And if I take the patient view and work backwards, it actually makes your prioritization really easy. And when you think about where you assign, whether it's dollars or people or your time, it makes it very simple to say, well, what's going to impact the patient versus what can I live with? And we've taken that approach, obviously at J&J, but we take that for the right reasons globally. And that's been something that's always nice to see from a decision-making point of view. And any challenge that comes up, you can kind of look at things from that lens and you can make a decision pretty quickly. But, the other thing I'll say to that, though, is external changes, because when we're thinking about any challenges that we have, and when I reflect on my career a little bit, when I was in manufacturing, the external environment where you have sometimes no control of has been remarkable to see how then you have to adapt to it. Because when I was in manufacturing, the company that I worked for, the partner company that I worked for made water tanks. And when you're in the business of collecting water, it was remarkable to see analytics from our call center, as well as our sales analytics, and how that would correlate to the weather. You have no control of the weather, but call volumes and sales volumes certainly changed if it rained and if it didn't rain. And if it was raining, you might have thought, well, I don't need a water tank anymore. So suddenly you're not calling to buy one. Maybe you're not thinking about the fact that that's the right time to harvest water and actually collect it. But ultimately, that business went out of business. They went into receivership. And I was part of the water tank part of the business, which was owned by a larger manufacturing company. And when we went into receivership, we found ourselves without IT infrastructure. So we had no access to our emails anymore, our files, anything like that. And in terms of challenges, that was a big one. How did we overcome it? We went straight to google.com, and suddenly we all signed up for Gmail accounts. We're on Google Drive. We're collaborating, sharing spreadsheets with price lists and things like that. Again, whatever you could try and drum up together. And I think that was probably one of the most crazy dynamic parts of my IT career, where we found ourselves effectively on the street needing to move to a cloud that we didn't really know much about at the time. This was many years ago before we trusted running a business on the cloud. But yeah, sometimes the external environment plays games on you, and that was a big one.
Absolutely. What's that old saying that you learn more in choppy waters than you do in calm waters? For sure, you learn a lot during those times. So, you spoke earlier about the importance of prioritization at Johnson & Johnson MedTech. So can you tell us a bit more then about, that alignment of your technology strategy with the overall business strategy?
Yeah, look, we take a real top-down approach to how we form our strategy locally. Now, while we do have influence from a local perspective as to where we can help the business move from a technology perspective, ultimately, when I see the business goals and the business strategy for the year, that helps me formulate what our technology strategy should be for the year as well. And we look at what's happening globally, what's happening in the region from an Asia Pacific prioritization point of view. But then if I was to form my local strategy and I use all of those as inputs, it makes it really easy, because myself, my team, we can look at all of our goals and objectives for the year, and every single one of them has a direct link to something that we've seen either on the business or technology strategy coming from the top down. And when you do that, you know exactly why you're doing what you're doing, why you're turning up to work each day. But then also when you do hear about new ideas or new projects that may be coming up, you start looking right back at that business strategy. You say, well, how does that idea or that initiative connect to the business strategy? And if it doesn't, you need to ask why you're doing it. And that's been an important act for us to do, is focus on what the business is doing, where they're going, and how we can support them. And as long as we can see those direct links, we're all heading in the same direction.
Yeah, fundamental, isn't it, to be connected to that overall mission and the goals of the company. So you spoke earlier, Geoff, around that interest that was in the wider business in AI during the Global Learning Day. And of course, there's not a day that goes by where Gen AI or AI isn't mentioned. So what impact do you think it will have on your industry? And is it something that you're actively using within your organization?
Yeah, look, I mean, I would hope every time you ask that question, you get a yes from the people that you're interviewing, because I mean, AI has been having an effect on industry broadly for a really long time. But now, as we're starting to see this emergence with Gen AI, and it will certainly do the same, if not a lot more than what AI ever did to us in the past. And at J&J, we've taken a pretty fast approach to Gen AI, and we firstly put in global policies just to make sure that we had guardrails which were very clear and very robust, to say we totally get that everyone wants to start using AI, especially generative AI tools. Let's just make sure we're doing it in the right way, and that our data isn't going to be at risk as a result of it. So we put in an internal GPT, mainly to avoid people going to external sites to play with it and ask questions. So by providing our own version of it meant that it was safer to use. Our employees could feel comfortable uploading a document to that GPT so they can ask it questions, do document comprehension and things like that. But that particular tool has allowed us to educate on prompting, to educate on creating content, the discovery of information, and save people time. And I think as much fun as people have had with Gen AI tools, where we're starting to see benefit is just that time impact. That if I have a 30-page white paper and I can upload it into our internal GPT to quickly get a summary or ask it questions, that saves a lot of our teams a lot of time. You always still need to fact check it and make sure it actually is pulling in correctly. But if that's the impact we're going to have initially, then I think we're making the right inroads. But what it is really allowing people to do is just get better at asking questions. In the past, you needed to be good at using Google. And you were good at using Google by asking the right questions in your search and using the right parameters. I think now the next challenge is, how do you get good at using GPTs? how do you ask the right questions to get really good insights from your data? And us giving them access to that has certainly helped. But externally and outside of J&J, we've started to form partnerships with NVIDIA, for example. We announced that, I think, a few weeks ago, which is going to bring AI into the operating theatre. And the partnership with NVIDIA and Johnson & Johnson is going to be a remarkable thing for us to see how we better educate, how we better do training through this combination of AI, video, and real-world learning as it does sit in the operating theatre. So that to me is more exciting and valuable than potentially using Microsoft Copilot to draft an email for me. But yeah, I think wherever you look, there is AI or Gen AI appearing in all facets of the business. And it's just how you apply that lens to the right project.
Wow, that's fascinating. I can't wait to hear how that impacts operating theatres and the results of that. It's going to be a fascinating area to watch. So look, Geoff, keen to hear your thoughts on technology partners. I mean, what looks good to you when it comes to talking to the different technology service providers out there? What does a good partnership look like from your perspective?
Oh, I mean, if you look at my LinkedIn messages, I can tell you the good ones and the bad ones. But I will say that for me, a good technology partnership is someone that knows our business. And it is easy to hear Johnson & Johnson and just think of the consumer arm that we used to have. But if people do want to work with us, it does help to know that we are serving patients. And these are people in their most vulnerable times on an operating table needing our business to operate. So when we look at anything that we're doing, we're thinking about how that relationship with that vendor could potentially impact that patient. And as long as at the end of the day, it's only going to be a positive impact, not just for them, but ultimately our employees, then that helps. But if people open conversations knowing what we do as a company, then I'm much more likely actually to have a conversation with you as well. And we recently went through a telco revision of contracts, and we went out to tender, and it was a fascinating process because it was only then that I actually met the account manager that we had, who was the incumbent. But it's not those times that I want to have that relationship starting to build, but it was amazing to see the other vendors that did get involved in the bidding process to see what research they had done, or to hear what their first questions were when they wanted to engage with us. Did they go straight to the tech, or did they actually want to know our business and what our needs were? And I think, like anything, even if you're dating, you want to know a bit more about the person potentially before you get to that end goal, I think. So, it was stark to see how people do approach that these days. And, I get we all want to close deals, but it's nice to build that relationship first.
Yeah, absolutely. It being an actual partnership, not just someone that you hit up when you want to move.
Mm-hmm.
So Geoff, you spoke there about that external relationship. So then, when it comes to internally, how are you demonstrating the value that your team brings to your local organization, and how do you work with others on the exec or on the board to influence and collaborate?
Yeah, look, a big part of my role, as I've realized more and more, is stakeholder engagement and communication. That has become a fundamental part of what I need to be doing every day. And I need to be, I guess, so connected to my business partners. I guess like we were talking about the vendors before, I need to be doing the same with my business partners. I need to understand the commercial direction. I need to know their status. I need to make sure that we're aligning our team to exactly where they're going. Even on a weekly basis, if there's something that needs to change or something that needs to be done differently, I need to make sure I'm not only connecting with our business partners on that, but bringing all of the tech teams along the way as well. Now, in saying that, in terms of demonstrating your value, I think it's easy when you finish a project to just demonstrate that the project was on time and on budget. But again, maybe it's at J&J or other companies, but that's just not enough. It's not enough just to say that you did what you said you were going to do. We actually need to think about, how do we demonstrate the impact of what you did? And if we can really show and measure what the feedback has been, whether it's from employees or from our customers, what impact this project has had on them, and how we measure whether it's time saved or new capabilities that they've been able to experience, that's much more exciting for the board, for me, for anybody else, than just on time and on budget. So collecting feedback, what it's meant for the patient, the surgeon, the hospital, all of that certainly matters the most. But then look, from a board perspective, I am fortunate enough now to be able to attend parts of the board meeting and provide updates to them as well, especially as it relates to major projects. And look, from a learning perspective, I'm still learning a lot around influence and collaboration. I haven't been in this position for a very long time, and I would say I'm on a very steep learning curve at the moment, which I'm loving. But what I've definitely learned is not only should you be prepared before going in, and you could go through your slides 100 times, make sure you know what you're going to say, but your stakeholders, especially those in the room that you're planning to address, they need to be prepared about what you're about to say as well. And the more that you've had maybe a couple of calls or short meetings before that board meeting to address a couple of the people that you maybe need to talk to directly in that board meeting, it eliminates the need for surprises. And ultimately, I think surprises are best left for birthday parties and not really for the boardroom.
Well said, well said. So, earlier we spoke about, the increased focus on costs for many companies and resourcing. Are there any other challenges? I mean, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing IT leaders in general today?
Look, I would say probably within any industry at the moment, cybersecurity has to be probably the number one for anybody at the moment. Not only preparing for sort of when you'll be attacked, but ensuring that the business is not only aware of the risk, but how prepared they'll also be to respond. And if you're not thinking about simulation exercises or tabletop exercises to ensure that your board, that your business continuity plans are in place, and that anything else is prepared, because it really is that factor of when rather than if. I know we say that a lot now, but it couldn't be more true. We talk about AI and how exciting that is, but on the flip side, those criminals that have been attacking organizations have tools like that, and they are brilliant. They are brilliant tools that they have, that they can mimic voice, they can mimic video, they can mimic networks, and do so much more than they were ever capable of. So you really do need to be prepared from that perspective. But I think the other challenge that we've all got as IT leaders at the moment is education. I talked about digital literacy before, but depending on the company, not everyone is a traditional tech company. We're not all Google companies, right? So how do we make sure that our employees are using the right tools to do the right job, and not trying to sort of hammer a screw? Because I think we're so lucky today to have so many resources available to us. Even if you look at what Microsoft offer now, the amount of applications in their suite is huge. It's not just PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook anymore. And with everything else that's at their fingertips, do they know how to use it? And do they know how to use it correctly? That's saving them time and getting their work done properly. And from a challenge perspective, it's how do you make sure that your teams are all educated? How do you make sure the organization is prepared to use those? And ultimately, that's where I think a lot of the advantage could come from.
And look, it is ever changing, that cybersecurity landscape, the different technologies that are emerging. So how do you keep up to date yourself with everything that's coming in the pipeline?
Yeah, look, I've always had a real curiosity towards technology and trends. So I leverage a lot of social media and Google News to sort of aggregate things for me and help things rise to the top. But, it was only up until relatively recently that I was double hatting in my life, where I had this life at Johnson & Johnson, which I've had for a while, but I was also this consumer technology expert by night. And, that other life had me on radio 6 times a week. I had my own podcast. I'd appear on morning shows like Sunrise and the Today Show, and even writing for large publications as well. But that part of my life had me so immersed in technology trends and upcoming, I guess, technology, whether it was consumer related or not. But it also provided me this lens to figure out where I'm going to leverage, where you start hearing about the first Amazon smart speaker and all this, this was years ago. What's going on around smart speakers? And I think, what would a smart speaker be like inside our office? Could our managing director have one and ask questions about sales figures or, growing customer bases and things like that? And when the Apple Watch came out, would it be interesting to have sales analytics on a watch so you could just look at your wrist when you wake up in the morning and see that? Even virtual reality, I think I was just a bit lucky that while it wasn't a it wasn't a huge connection to my job at the time. It was amazing to see how I could use all of that external and emerging trends that was happening and just bring that back into the office. And whether I had a different phone every week or not didn't matter. It was more why I might have had that and what could have been eventuating from it.
So you clearly love technology and the new gadgets that come out. So when it comes to your team, then how do you foster that spirit of innovation and inspire creativity?
Look, I think the first part behind creativity and innovation is safety. Creating psychological safety in our team, albeit a small team, is what really allows us to express thoughts and ideas. If everyone's feeling comfortable to speak up, then suddenly you don't keep your ideas to yourself and you start to share them, and an idea shared will likely grow. And that has driven a lot more collaboration within the team. And it allows people to, I guess, fail without fear. That if you aren't worried about how things will look in front of your peers or things that you might say that might not be correct, that safety element really does allow people just to flourish from an innovation point of view. But as I mentioned, because it is a small team and we all actually report mostly out into the Asia Pacific region or similar, each week we all make the effort to come together on a Wednesday morning, and we'll share key information about what we're working on, new projects, things that are in the pipeline. And it's amazing to see when you do that, the different members start to sort of listen and go, hang on, well, if you're doing that, that may actually be beneficial to me. I've got this project that's happening here, or I had a conversation with someone in the business who could probably benefit from that. And that has really helped us, because I think even within IT, you can operate within silos a lot. And unfortunately, if you are operating in silos, you've effectively got these blinkers on, and it's very hard to innovate in an impactful way if you're not seeing that full picture of what's happening in your IT world.
And you mentioned that, failure there and the importance of that, in that environment of psychological safety. So, is there anything when you reflect back on that may have been a mistake, but you learned a lot from it and it really shaped you as a leader?
Yeah, look, if I don't fail once a week in some shape or form, I'll be surprised. But I've been really fortunate that I've worked alongside some incredible people, whether it's at J&J or prior to that, and I've learned a lot by watching and experiencing different leadership's behaviors, and I continually sort of try and see those things and bring them back to how I can be a little bit better myself. Some of the big examples would be how you better prioritize, learning how to say no. Leaders who drove this push to continue to educate and improve yourself and do external courses and make sure you're always in touch with what you're doing. But now that I am in more of a leadership position, it's totally different, because you're sort of the one being watched a little bit more now, and I'm having a lot more of those learning moments. And that's a lot of the time been related to maybe how I approach a situation or how I communicate it or represent it. It's sometimes a lot more thinking with what's up here rather than a gut feeling. And depending on who you're approaching in an organization, you may need to change the language that you're using or the way you're talking about something, just to make sure that A, it's not being misinterpreted, and B, it's a completely clear and understood communication that you're having. So yeah, it's been fascinating. It's sometimes so easy just to go with your gut, but you do need to pull yourself back a little bit, especially in such a large organization like we have, and just make sure that whatever you say, it doesn't matter at what level it's being heard, that you're not going to be regretting that.
And what's the best bit of career advice you've ever got, or do you have any advice for aspiring IT leaders?
Look, I would say probably more recently, some really interesting advice was 3 words, was act as if. And I think if you've seen the movie Boiler Room, I think it may have come from originally, I'm not sure. But as it relates to what your next role is or could be, the act as if advice that I received was, think it, do it, and be it. People around you need to imagine you in a particular role before that role is effectively available. And you can only do that if you're presenting yourself as ready. You need to look the part, you need to talk the part. I'd say for other aspiring leaders, my advice would just be to first of all, try and seek out mentors and guidance from those around you. I think that's such a missed opportunity that people are sometimes afraid to take, but not knowing just how many leaders are really open to helping you and provide that guidance. But then also not to be complacent, not to be sitting back. Unfortunately, there are still probably a lot of people out there, and you see this sort of narrative online of people saying, well, I was never promoted, but I expected it to come to me. I thought my work would just show itself. And it's not enough just to let your work do the talking. You really need to be putting yourself forward, especially if it's an internal move, to make sure that it's clear what your ambition is. And I think if you speak to previous people multiple times who are in the role that I'm in today, the first time that they both met me, the first thing I had said to them, maybe not the first thing, but one of the first things I said to them was, one day I want to be in your job. And you can only do that if you feel safe to say that to a senior leader. But that was certainly my intention. And by making that clear, the support I got from them was phenomenal. It continually allowed their way of thinking that I potentially have a successor ready when it's their time to move on to the next thing as well. And people want that.
Yeah, it's so key making that ambition known. And so finally then, Geoff, we're a quarter of the way into 2024. Are there any other exciting initiatives in the pipeline for you and the team at Johnson & Johnson MedTech?
There's certainly a lot happening. I'll say that globally, we're about to probably go through one of the larger changes that I think we'll have experienced, and that's really around standardization and this theory of intentional architecture, where, being such a large company, 120,000 employees, and in almost every country on the planet, it hasn't been easy to have consistency on every platform or every piece of software that's being used. And there is a plan in place to try and create some standardization there, what CRM we're using, what analytics tools we're using, how we drive insight. And by doing that globally, it is the reason it's exciting for me is because it's going to allow our data to be much more robust and much more insightful than it has ever been. It's going to allow our systems to be more interconnected and I guess efficient in a number of ways as well. But then it will just drive a lot more functionality that we probably hadn't seen before. And as we've sometimes operated in markets or even in region, being able to think more globally is a huge thing for us. So, we talk a lot about AI. That's always going to be a factor. I think anybody currently who's working in IT would say that this is the best time to ever be working in IT. And there is so much happening, whether it's in this organization or others. Everyone would be wanting to work in IT at the moment, and I can see why. It's the best era I think we're going to see for a long time.
Love it. Love the positivity. It certainly is a very interesting time to be working in the industry. Geoff Quattromani, Head of Technology at Johnson & Johnson MedTech ANZ, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.